So as you go through the proof of concept, like I said, how do you assess, your success and failures? And has there ever been a time when you thought, well, this isn't going to work, we need to move on to something else? When do you cut your losses and say, now it's time to, or don't you?
I'm not at that stage yet. I'm going to keep plugging away as long as I possibly can. I believe that this is going to work, and I have lots of ideas to be able to try to prove that. And I'm continuing to write proposals to address different aspects of that and different comorbidities and things like that. And so there are lots of opportunities for that kind of thing. So I'll keep trying until I'm convinced that it doesn't work, and I'm not convinced. And I think it'll take a lot moving into larger animals and different disease processes and things like that so far. And it's been interesting and surprising because I sometimes when you're doing these kinds of experiments, you expect that one day you're going to do that experiment that's going to backfire and be definitive in that this definitely doesn't work. And I've continually been surprised that we keep getting data that shows us that it is working. So as long as that keeps going, I'm going to keep going.
How about you, Dan? Because you have a little bit of different perspective on this.
Yeah. I guess there's a lot of different reasons I would say let's stop. Some of it is the feasibility. So like I said before, no, we just can't do that. Oh, okay. Is there something that we can do? How do we make this better? And if there is it's just the technology isn't available right now, that's sometimes a problem, right?
Right.
I had a class last semester that I taught, and their project was called the Innovation Project, and it was exactly like I was talking about before. Find something that you think that design can help community or culture or people's lives, and figure out how you can take a design approach to it. And I would have students bring ideas. Where do you think you can fit in? And sometimes just there's 10 of them out there already. What are you going to do that's better than that? What are those things lacking? Well, Apple Pay really isn't lacking much. Okay, so stop trying to do what Apple Pay is actually doing, because it's really not going to lead you anywhere, right? You don't have the money to back up like they do. So what is it that they're not doing that you can maybe find that you can do as a designer? So in some cases, is there a marketplace for it? If other people are doing it better than what you have the ability to do, then don't waste your time in that, and find something that you can be passionate about, and find something that you can actually make.
Right.
That's actually you can actually make into a reality.
So Ed, in industry, I imagine you've had some successes and failures.
More failures than successes, but I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
And that's a time where, good management has to be able to look at things and say, because I think as an engineer, a lot of times you get so close to your project that you don't want to give it up. But somebody's got to make that calculation. Is it worth going on? Is it worth committing more resources? Or is this a dead end and we need to move those resources to something else? It's hard to answer that question. I think it's a little different every time.
Is that included in the education that students get at ECU?
I doubt it. Yeah. I know as a capstone design students, there's certain milestones along the way where they've got to, of course they can't really give up on their project because they want to spend another year here, but I think there are times where you have to say, maybe you have to regroup. Maybe this road you're going down isn't going to get you to where you need to be, and you really, instead of being so focused on one solution, maybe look at some of those you threw out earlier and go
look
down
at other
one of those
alternatives.
as well. Right.
So how important is the timeline as you move toward your idea to invention and this proof of concept? How important is kind of thinking about that timeline and establishing a timeline, or is it not important?
I think time is very important, especially if you've established that if you've gotten to the point where you're very close to the proof of concept, that time is critical, because if you want to be able to move it to those next stages, then you have to make sure that you've got everything lined up to be able to do that. And it's tricky though, because when you're doing something that is in new territory, in adventuring into the unknown, then having to establish a timeline it's difficult to foresee the future when you don't know where things will lead you.
Right.
And that's where having a good team and doing the critical experiments to move you forward in the right direction and believing your data or not believing your data comes into play, I think.
And you're looking at this protein that may be therapeutic. Okay, so moving it into, say, the clinic, there is a timeline
Absolutely.
for that.
Absolutely, and that's something that's a whole other beast, because being able to go through all the clinical trials and make sure that there's not something that we've been missing as we've been testing it that might be potentially toxic in certain situations. There are a lot of other hoops to go through for that. So
there's a certain part where the investors just want to know that it works, where the scientist and you probably don't want to know why it works
exactly,
or how it works.
Exactly.
Right?
It's been interesting and challenging, but fun to try to move those two tracks together, because as an academician, you want to be able to know why it is that it's doing what it's doing, especially when it's going against everything that you ever learned in your education. Right. And so, but there's so much that we don't know, and so to be able to move that forward is a fun thing to do.
Right.
But then again, if it doesn't mean something to people, it's just knowledge, right? So to be able to move it into the realm where it would be able to help people is the driving force for it.
Right.
But that's a challenge too, because there are lots of different milestones that have to be met in order to establish its reliability and feasibility and not toxic and all that kind of stuff. So.
Exactly.